Hey, what's up, everybody? BDL44 coming at you in another video. All right, so not responding, but reacting to Kyrie's agent releasing a statement, essentially saying that they never requested a trade. That if the Nets don't want Kyrie, that's one thing, but they opted in. When people started talking about trading Kyrie when he made his trade request, that's when everyone was like, all right, well, let's just subsequently trade Kyrie. Kyrie actually chose to stay with the Nets for $36 million. So that's the facts. Those are the facts. That's not our revelation. That's not something that we need to be mulling over in any way. That's exactly how that went. That's how it was reported. That's what we know to have taken place. See, this is a reoccurring theme where they release information that we already know in a way that's supposed to shock the hell out of us. And I'm immune to that. Like, I literally understand when I have information already. That's information I already have. Now, the question is, why was that released by Kyrie's agent? What was the intent on making that clear? What purpose does that hold? Well, it's simple. They still want the 5 years from the Nets. And I've been telling you guys this the whole time, and that's never been something that's left my mind. I just never thought that the Nets were going to waver and give them the 5 years. But the point is, if they put the 5 years on the table, the extension on the table, that they can agree to, that doesn't have those crazy contingencies that we've talked about, that Ticket TV let us in on through his sources. With that information, we understand that, hey, the man's still trying to secure this generational wealth in these 5 years. This is very important for a player who doesn't have a lot of durability. Respectfully, we know he's had issues with injuries. He needs to lock up in his 30s. So that's what I believe KD's trying to help along with. Given the fact that Kyrie's taken such a hit with his reputation, they have to strategize a way to try to get him his 5 years if at all possible. And this is the best possible way. So it's one of those situations where you just want to leave the Nets the opportunity to change their mind, to look at what's going on in their situation and realize it's too much trouble to go through this process. And ultimately bring these guys back, or at least bring Kyrie back at the 5 years. As to which I think KD will then rescind his trade request. I believe that wholeheartedly. I think the whole point of all of this is to try to get Kyrie the 5 years. And so while he would love to come to the Lakers, that's not guaranteeing that he's getting 5 years, not by any stretch of the imagination. Jeannie Buss hasn't shown any inclination that that's her plan. We're intent on bringing him in for this year, and then everything else is probably contingent on whether or not LeBron stays with us. And he's up for extension at the end of this year as well. So that's what the future holds for Kyrie with the Laker path. It doesn't look as secure as 5 years, whatever the maximum amount they would be able to give him. So that's where the goal ultimately lies for Kyrie Irving. It's just not a reality, basically, to think that that's going to ultimately be offered by the Nets. Doesn't seem realistic. So it seems more so realistic that he can move on. It seems more so realistic that the Nets desperately want to get rid of him. You understand what I'm saying? So these are the things that we also understand. So the object of the game for Kyrie's representation is to get him that 5 years. That's their objective as a company that gets players paid. So this is who's really releasing this information, and that is the purpose of that information. So we always want to see what's being released and why is it being released. Yeah, the information itself, the news itself is great. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from a rival team? Yes? Okay, then they're obviously trying to position themselves so they can have their own interests met. Is it coming from a certain side of the fence that maybe wants to see something else happen? Maybe it's coming from the NBA itself. Maybe they want to see certain things happen. Maybe they'll feed the media what they want. Who knows? So for us, that's what we try to pay attention to. We call that a tea leaf. We take that information, we plug it into our database, so to speak, and we plug and pick and put things together and ultimately find conclusions. And that's how we work here. So, I look at this particular situation and I just say, it's worth a shot. That's basically what you say to Kyrie's representation. It's worth a shot. You got to see it through. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, Brooklyn is in a space where they're going to take on a lot of headaches, and they have to look at their history and realize that it's a good chance the next move they make isn't going to turn them into a dynasty necessarily. You know what I mean? It's like they're the Nets. At the end of the day, this is what the pundits have been saying since the beginning of this process, since basically they got swept out of the playoffs. You are the Nets. So if you're not going to pay Kyrie Irving and you're not going to keep Kevin Durant subsequently because of that, then you need to have a plan in place that's not going to send you back to the dumps. All right, so I'm seeing that they're working, they're churning, they're trying to figure something out. They're trying to pressure the Lakers. They're trying to knock on the door with the Indiana Pacers. Maybe negotiate with the Utah Jazz to maneuver getting Donovan Mitchell out of Utah for a ridiculous price tag. Just like they were able to get him, Rudy Gobert, out of Utah for a ridiculous price tag. I mean, this is Danny Ainge pulling strings, so you know for a fact that Donovan Mitchell is going to get them back at least 5 picks. You know it. And they're likely going to try to maneuver it in such a way to where, through attaching themselves to the Kevin Durant deal, they have an opportunity to do that. Now, Bobby Marks talked about a trade today. I think it was his trade, where he was saying that the Utah Jazz, the Indiana Pacers, and the Suns and Brooklyn could come together and try to maneuver such a way to where Ayton would land at Indy, KD goes to Phoenix, Mikal Bridges, who else was it? A few other players. I can't remember exactly the names. Ben Simmons and Cam Thomas, and like 5 picks going to Utah. And then Mikal Bridges, Donovan Mitchell, and Miles Turner was headed to Brooklyn. So this was just like a mock trade. Nothing that was reported, nothing that was necessarily true. But the thing about it was, because there's so few things that are actually possible right now, it's not only a rumor, it's probably the only real solution that I see personally. So it's like, yeah, it's a rumor, but when you start breaking away what it's possible, that looks like the best solution for all teams involved. So long as, and in my mind I say, so long as Kevin Durant is left with enough in Phoenix. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, obviously Chris Paul, but they're losing Mikal Bridges, they're losing DeAndre Ayton, they're losing obviously already the players that they've lost. McGee is out of there. I just look at them and I say, I don't know if they're going to be left with enough to convince themselves that that's the move to make. And I look at Utah, I say they're getting 5 picks. They should be fine. They're getting Ben Simmons. That's a great spot for Ben Simmons, as we had already talked about earlier today. If you were to land in Utah, I think that'd be the best spot for him, because he would be able to be built around, just like in Brooklyn. You know, they have the opportunity to have a clean slate, so that makes sense. And then you think about Ben Simmons and the possibility of them being a tanking team that could possibly have Victor on it next year. And you talk about the defensive possibilities of Victor and Ben Simmons as a tandem, with Victor being on a rookie contract. That could vault them to a space of contention, in my humble opinion, if they continue to tool around that duo. So I'm already envisioning what Utah is trying to envision, and it's a long shot because everybody has a chance at Victor with all these tanking teams around, but you can clearly see what their vision is. And then with the Brooklyn Nets, I like this for the Nets. This is how you put yourself in a position to retain some superstar level talent, while letting go of Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, and and of course Kevin Durant. You're losing so much, but what you do bring yourself back is Donovan Mitchell, Mikal Bridges, the most durable player in basically basketball, and Miles Turner, who can be an all-star level player if healthy for a full season. Now, you don't love your situation because you don't have any picks. You don't have necessarily Cam Thomas because you threw him away to Utah. So it's a lot missing there for Brooklyn to actually make them viable. But you can sell it to your fans with Donovan Mitchell coming home. And like I said, Mikal Bridges is such a fantastic defensive player, and he's going to play basically 82 games every year. So that right there will keep you good. You're going to be a good team. You're not going to be great. You're probably not going to make the playoffs the first year, but you'll be able to retool. And Donovan Mitchell will be happy. Mikal Bridges will be on tap for a couple extra years. And then you have a few other pieces there as well in the mix. So I think that's an okay scenario if teams can't figure out what else they want to do really, really fast. I think they should actually take his mock and do it, like literally do that, because it's the only thing I see that gives a solution to all parties involved. And I think the more I think about the Phoenix side of things, I just say, well, the way Phoenix is putting things together, they don't really care. They just want to put Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker on the floor and just blow teams out. So if that's their vision, God bless. I don't think it's going to work at all, but God bless, like literally, because I think that's what they're going for. I don't think they really even care who else is on the floor with those three. And so if that's what they're thinking, then they're going to be happy. Of course, Indy gets their guy in Ayton. That's a no-brainer. So that they'll be happy. They'll be giving up, I think, one pick in that situation. The majority of the picks would be coming from Phoenix in regards to acquiring Kevin Durant. So they'd be sending out Ayton, of course, in the sign-in trade, sending out Mikal also, and then, of course, the picks, 4 picks, I think 2 swaps or something like that. And that last pick would be coming from Indy. So all of that just makes sense to me. It's like, yo, maybe the teams that are involved in this should go back to the drawing board and say, you know what, even though this is an ESPN mock trade, yeah, I think it'll be a solution for all of us. I think we should actually consider this one. So, yeah, that's what I think. I ultimately think that should be done. And then if it were to be done, then we could start seeing other things start to happen. I'm sure Young Bull will sign somewhere. At that point, we'll see Kyrie Irving moved as well, I'm sure, at that point, because I don't think you bring Kyrie Irving back to Brooklyn after bringing in Donovan Mitchell and Mikal Bridges, although since you're losing so much talent, that actually makes a lot of sense, unfortunately. But I don't think they'll do that. I think what they'll do is then do a 3-way trade with us. And I don't think Westbrook lands in Brooklyn, even though a lot of people think they'll ultimately land with that contract. I don't think so. I think it's going to land somewhere else, and then they'll take on some more talent and maybe a pick or something to make it make sense, of course, in regards to ourselves, giving them our 27. They'll have that, I'm sure. And yeah, so that's kind of how I see all this playing itself out. Hopefully this Utah Indy thing actually takes place. I really do want some type of news to happen in regards to Donovan Mitchell, because I think that's more realistic to see him moved than to see Kevin Durant moved right away. I don't think you can move Kevin Durant in this climate. I don't think you can. I think you need to move Donovan Mitchell either first or with him in order for Kevin to be moved. Because right now, it's just the waters are too messy. You can settle for Toronto's deal, but they don't want to give up Barnes. I'm not with that if I'm Brooklyn. There's no way I'm doing that without that. And then everybody's mentioning how the Pelicans should get involved, and I've mentioned how I don't believe you've given up on Brandon Ingram for Kevin Durant makes any sense at all. I just simply rather have Brandon Ingram for 4 years and all that I already have. So, as you guys know, I got the Pelicans possibly coming out of the West this year. I know that sounds a little premature to a lot of y'all, but that's because you haven't seen what they're putting on the floor. And I can see it in my mind's eye. I know exactly what they're putting on the floor. And then you consider what Trey Murphy's doing. No, I didn't even mention him when I was considering what the Pelicans are going to be. He's one of my favorite players that came out of the draft last year, if not my favorite player in the draft last year, and I literally forgot about him. So you got to understand, the Pelicans are loaded. They got good coaching, and I legitimately think they're better than a lot of teams you guys think are going to be better than them, including the Clippers. I don't like the Clippers that much because I don't trust them to be healthy. Everybody's thinking Kawhi Leonard's about to be healthy, and I'm telling you, that is a bad bet. It's a terrible bet, actually. So that's how I'm looking at the situation. I just don't like it. Norman Powell coming back from injury, I don't like it. So we'll see. They're deep, but the Clippers have a lot of Chiefs. That's what I'll say about that. They got a lot of Chiefs. I don't know if they realize they have a lot of Chiefs, and maybe I'm just looking at it a certain way, but I'm looking at all the personalities that they're putting together, and this year, even though everybody just thinks assuming they're just going to rush toward wins, I think injuries could keep that from happening, and I think infighting could take place from there. It's just a lot of a lot of alpha personalities and guys that are used to being stars and guys that are used to. And you're bringing John Wall to a situation with Reggie Jackson, and you got Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and the idea that Kawhi Leonard may or may not be around. And you got guys like Norman Powell, who are probably best when he shoots more than 12 shots a game. You got guys like Covington on the back of the bench who used to do it more. Probably ain't going to play as much. Batum, going to being on the floor more, probably isn't going to play as much. You got Coffee in Boston, the young players. It's a lot of guys there that expect a lot from themselves. And so Ty Lue is going to have guys buying into sitting. And that is going to be the task for him. Now, if they're winning, I don't think anybody's going to have any problems. But if they start struggling, or if guys are going in and out of the lineup, which I expect to have happen, there's going to be some unhappy people when their minutes are cut and their production is cut while they're hot because so-and-so came back from injury. Trust me, I see that coming. Also, do they have a secondary facilitator? I'm not certain. Most of those guys that I mentioned, without the name John Wall, are all looking for their own shot. All of them. Not looking for each other. So it's going to be on John Wall to keep that going, to keep that continuity going. And I think that the Clippers also discovered some continuity within themselves near the end of last season and in the playoffs where they were able to kind of work that demon out. So we'll see if that chemistry carries over. But naturally, those players are not looking for one another. That has to be something that they consider and has to be working to their system. So we'll see how they do that this year with new players. So it's a lot of different things I'm looking at there. I'm like, I'm warming up to what the Timberwolves are. Honestly, I am. And the reason why is because even though I don't love Rudy Gobert's piece, I do love the length that they provide. And even though I hate the trade, just looking at them on the surface as a team this season, they do have a lot to work with. I just don't like the trade. I think they gave up so very much to get back a player that I truly don't believe is fit for the era we're in. But if used and utilized properly, can have a massive impact next to Karl Towns with the spacing of guys like D'Angelo Russell, Ant-Man. I don't know if they retained Beasley. I think he went off to Utah. I don't remember. But if he's there, he would obviously be involved in that. And so I like the fact that they still have some of their guys that they kept. Now, giving up Patrick Beverley was a bad decision, but it's an entirely different team, an entirely different dynamic. And though I do think they'll miss him, I think they've created something entirely different. So I don't even think it'll matter. It's like you miss him, but because of the presence of Rudy Gobert, your whole style has changed. Your game has changed. Your identity's changed. So it's like Patrick Beverley on this team would have had a different effect. I don't know if it would have been the same way. You don't ask him to do as much. He's probably not even on the floor as much. So that's essentially what I'm saying to you guys. Now they have to be mindful of spacing much more than ever before because of Rudy Gobert and how he takes away from the offensive side of the ball just in general. So Patrick Beverley, you know what I mean? You'd be wanting more from him offensively than necessarily what he provides defensively, I think, with the fit that Rudy provides. So it's weird to me, honestly. I don't know how those two players are going to play with one another, Cat and Rudy, to begin with. All I know is if you throw them on the floor together, they're towers that you must match up with. So if you do certain small ball lineups, it's not possible for you to succeed. You know, maybe you're shooting the ball at a high clip, 3-point shots could rain. Maybe that helps you, but you have to take into account that they got players roaming around like D'Lo, like Ant-Man, that are going to still keep up with you. Even if those big guys are slower, they're at the rim making everything easy for those guards. So that's life, like so easy for jump shooters. They don't have to really worry about certain things like rebounding and all that. They can just get out on the break and speed past those big guys. And then what ends up happening is, as they speed past those big guys, you got Karl Towns probably trailing, steps into easy 3-point shots and things of that nature without ever having to worry about rebounding the ball or considering what has to happen in the paint in order for him to rim protect, things of that nature. He can focus on leaking out and doing various different things that he never ever would have been able to do as the main center for the team. So we get to see what really Karl Towns can actually do. We get to see him roam around and play the four and stuff like that. And I am entirely too intrigued by that, especially if he's going to continue on the trajectory he's been going in the offseason of taking care of his body and becoming faster running the floor. If he continues on that path and gets faster than he even was last year, I think Karl's going to play very well at the four spot for this team. So I'm warming up to the Timberwolves. I got over the trade. Now that that's over with, you just look at what they got. They still have a lot. I don't know that they can win no championship, nothing like that. I don't have them as a top 4 team in the West, but I definitely have them making the playoffs. And there's going to be a good portion of the season where you're going to look at them as one of the top teams in the league. I do believe that. But, it's going to be about Ant-Man's jump, D'Angelo's health, and ultimately how Rudy Gobert looks. Is he going to come back slower than he was last year? Has Father Times caught up to him even more so? Because I think it began to last year. So if he's a sluggard and he turns into what I think he's about to turn into, which is no go, as in fall off a cliff production-wise. If he turns into what I think he's about to turn into, it's going to be devastating. But even so, it's much more graceful if he does it with Karl Towns next to him than, say, if he would have did it in Utah with no other big. So this, for him, is great, to be completely honest with you. And I think that part is lost here as well. So, yeah, I wanted to kind of expound on that because I hadn't returned back to that trade, and I don't think I really broke it down basketball-wise because I was so shocked by the assets that were going back and forth. So, yeah, that is that. Can't say there's anything else I want to share. I'm trying to figure out if there's another team I want to jump into or anything of that nature. I just want to chat with you guys. Hope everybody's having a good day. Also, speaking of Sean Marks, before I go, he said that Steph Curry was the second best player of all time. I was going to make a video on this, but I didn't want to dignify it. Honestly, I didn't want to dignify it, man. I think people say certain things during certain times of the year just for shock value. Steph Curry just came off a championship. I respect that championship. If people want to vault him into the top 10, I'm not going to fight y'all on that one. I'm really not. I respect the impact that he's had on the game and how he's affected the game and changed the game. It's Shaq-like, just in a different way. So if you want to throw him into that top 10, I respect that. He's won enough. But to say he's the second greatest player of all time is blasphemous. It's not taking enough into account. He hasn't finished winning. You know what I mean? And not only that, but he doesn't affect the defensive side of the ball in such a way that makes that credible at all. There's two sides of the basketball floor, and Michael Jordan dominated both of them. And so that is the end of that. Plus a perfect record in the finals matters. Accolades that far exceed. So that's not credible, man. I'm not going to be disrespectful and say that he's not continuing to ascend. You know what I mean? He can continue to win, continue to dominate. I understand what Sean Marks was saying in regards to him seeing that killer instinct in him that he sees in Michael, to where you expect the ball to go in no matter what. I totally agree. Like, I literally see the same thing. But that's just one slider, so to speak. There's like a million different things that we need to pick apart before crowning somebody to go. And just because you have that particular slider that's so very, very awesome, that doesn't mean that you get to usurp everybody else's sliders of all time except for one person. So no, that's not how this works, man. I don't like how easy it is to vault people above others in the prisoner of the moment type of mentality. I just don't like that. I understand that people are prisoners of the moment. We're just humans. But I really truly look at the NBA as something that is not only a historical situation that you have to view it from, but also the ever-changing, ever-evolving aspect of the game too. So it's like, even if you want to crown Steph Curry the greatest of all time, if we're going to keep doing that, it's going to be somebody else in about 3 weeks. And after that, it's going to be someone else after 6 months. And after that, you understand what I'm saying? He's not going to be the greatest for long if we're going to do it that way. So I don't like it. I think as Chris Broussard said, I believe it was, you need to nitpick in these situations. I totally agree. I've been saying that for years. When you talk about the greatest anything, It's not about just looking at it blanketed and then coming to a conclusion. No, you got to come up with new, innovative ways of breaking down exactly what it is that you're looking at. You got to create new stats to break it down to further zero in on just why that person is better than every single one else. Not only are you supposed to nitpick, you're supposed to just pick through it with a fine-tooth comb and continue to do so ad nauseum if you're actually doing it properly, because you're simply measuring the pinnacle. So that's how I look at the situation. It never ends. If we're going to talk about the greatest, I'm going to compare them to things that don't even make any sense. I'm pulling players out of different sports and comparing greatnesses and different intangibles to those players to them. It's like it's impossible to come up with who's the greatest basketball player. It's too nuanced. And quite honestly, the greatest basketball player could arguably be the greatest athlete to have ever played. So it's not just as simple as saying, oh, who's the greatest player in the NBA? Who's the greatest? Like the person the greatest person happened to walk the earth and ever do any sports, you could argue was a basketball player. So, yeah, it's just, let's relax here, man. Let's not vault Steph Curry into a position that he hasn't earned. You know, based on aspirations and benchmarks that, quite frankly, he cannot reach. And let's just be very honest about that. So, you know, I do believe that Steph Curry's impact cannot be tarnished. I think he's the greatest shooter of all time. And I don't think that's debatable at all. I think he's one of the most unselfish superstars of all time, given the fact that he was able to welcome KD in and then win with him and without him just the same, before and after. I think that's one of the more incredible superstar feats of all time. And then given the fact that he's gotten his finals MVP, people can't take that from him. I got him real high, man. Don't get it twisted. You know, there's a lot of people that can't see him. But when you start talking about the greatest, second greatest, nah, man, that's not right. You don't need to do that. No, not just because you seen him win a championship and he hit a couple shots you really appreciate. I saw those same shots. They were freaking awesome. So that's what I got, man. My name is BDF44. I thank you all for watching.